Welcome to the Sheffield Sunday As-Bill season meeting. This is a main share meeting, and it is with great pleasure and much gratitude that we welcome David G. from Chicago, who's come to share for about 40 minutes, after which we'll open for general sharing or if you'd like to ask a question. Thank you, David. It's wonderful to have you, and the floor is yours.
Awesome. So great to be here with everybody. Thanks for having me. So my name is David, and I am a recovered alcoholic. And so with respect to the fact that this meeting is being recorded, and with respect to the fact of the reading today is talking about Tradition 11, all I'm going to tell you is my name is David, and maybe my last initial G. I'll say one thing. I gave Young probably the wrong city. He said I'm from Chicago. I'm in the Chicago area, but I'm actually in this little farm town about 70 miles west of Chicago called Sandwich. And it's cornfields across the street, although they just took down the November corn and woods there. So I'm very un-Chicago in where I actually live. Not that that really means anything, but I tend to mention this because I live in this tiny pocket where there's just 18 houses and have a sponsor who lives two doors down, right? So try as I might to avoid having a sponsor, as can happen from time to time. It is tough to avoid him when he's 100 feet away. He's always out mowing or shoveling or something. Like, I should go talk to John, right? And I am going to be talking about the 11th tradition a little bit today because the reading. So I got to also give thanks to my service sponsor, Mike L., who is here, who I met early on, maybe even in this meeting 5 years ago or something like this, who was a big inspiration to me to start to study the traditions and the concepts and everything beyond the steps. I should say that I've been clean and sober since March 21st, 2004. So, 21 plus years now, and was always really into the book, for whatever that means. I believed in studying the book and taking the guys through the work. But for many, many years, I'd say for about 15, 16 years, I was kind of a one legacy member. I was really into the program recovery and the books and coming out of the book. And yeah, I was into the unity too, but I didn't really have an appreciation for other two legacies. I didn't really have an appreciation for unity and service in the way that I do now. And I attribute so much of this to the blessings of the pandemic. Again, that's how I found out about this group. And I had the pleasure of speaking here 4 or 5 years ago for the first time. And thank you, Young, for booking me again. And thank you, everybody who's kept this meeting and this group going. This was one of the first big groups that I found online when everything went sideways and we had to retreat into Zoom. And it's funny, when we started these Zoom meetings because of the pandemic, it was such a scary time and we were all freaked out, right? Like, what's going on in our world? And so I'm like a software consultant. And so for me, these sort of meeting web technologies is this old hat. But I live out here in the middle of cornfields. So we got a lot of old rural people here. And for my home group at the time, I put together this Zoom meeting and they thought I was some kind of wizard. They're like, what is this? And we got together and we were all going to talk online. But then we got into it, right? And this beautiful thing happened is that we were able to keep meeting in the face of all this scariness and uncertainty, right? And then from that blossomed not only our ability to stay in touch here locally, but again, to start to meet people all over the world. And I can only see a few, and I saw some names coming in. I know my buddy Dallas here, who I met very early on, and I saw my friend Charlotte in here, and met very early on. There's been a lot of people here that I've gotten to know and consider friends. 5, 6 years ago, we all met online, and I have not had the privilege of shaking their hands or giving them a hug in person yet, but I'll get over to the UK sooner or later, and to one of these conferences or conventions. And I want to say I don't get to make this meeting very often. Once in a while, I'll be in the car and I'll grab a little bit of the speaker. But the reason I don't make this one anymore is I've got a Sunday morning study group that is me with some of the guys that I sponsor and some of the guys that they sponsor and some of the guys that they sponsor. And we've been doing this on Sundays off and on for a few years now. And so it's cool to get together. It's a group of 8 or 10 hardcore guys, and it goes 3 or 4 levels deep in my lineage, which is really fun. And not that it's my lineage, right? It's AA's lineage. It's just guys we're in this row of men doing the work, taking people through the steps, and we started studying the traditions as a group. Again, as inspired by Mike. We've gone through the traditions slowly a couple times. We've been studying the concepts and the service structure. It's just such a blessing. And we get together at 7:30 a.m. on a Sunday when a lot of times people want to sleep in, but everybody's there all the time. And today I said, guys, I can't make it. I got to give a lead. And they're like, we're going to come support you. Right. So my boys here, and I don't miss some of you, so forgive me, guys. I can only see a few, but I think I saw Raphael and Jose and Levi and Mike and Daniel, and I think Steve, but my boys, right? My local guys are here. And my best buddy in recovery, the other David G, is here. We do a lot of this work together, shoulder to shoulder, going to treatment centers and trying to carry this message. And it's funny, this reading talks about being careful to avoid power, prestige, and money. I can't think of an errand that will more keep me away from power, prestige, and money than continuing to do the wet work that we do in recovery. Going to treatment centers where you get a room full of guys and gals who, I don't want to say they're all Thorazined out like sometimes when you go into the hospitals, but they're beat, they're exhausted, they're downtrodden, they're depressed. They're shaking their heads. They got the arms crossed, but we're just there every month, taking them through step one. That's all we do. It's the message we carry. It's like, guys, we want you to get this. We want to help get you to God. We want you to help form a new relationship with God as you understand Him, right? And it all starts with step one. And then we hope that you get into the rest of the work and you join us on this road and you get into the traditions and you get into the concepts. And so, I opened the book, and Young texted me the other day. He's like, hey, what reading you want to do? I popped it open, and it just popped open to this reading on 198. And I was like, I feel like that's tradition 11. And then I thought, it's November. So I don't know if God was telling me that I needed to talk about this or think about this, but I decided that God told me this. And I felt like that was a good idea, right? So this, I feel like tradition 11 has become so important to me because I started to understand what it meant. So my understanding of all the traditions, guys, was based on the banner that I saw on the wall for the first 15, 16 years of my recovery, right? My experience of the traditions was an off the wall experience. It was a crazy one, which is to say it was uneducated and short-sighted because I didn't really know what they meant. What do those traditions mean as we read them on a banner on the wall any more than what do the steps mean when I read them for the first time? All right. When I looked at those steps for the first time and I read those in my mind, I was like, 1, no, 2, maybe, 3 through 12, no, right? The only one that sounded like I could start to come to terms with was step 2, where I was going to get to restore to a bit of sanity, but everything else sounded terrible, right, at the beginning. And so when I read those traditions, did I have any sort of better comprehension of them either? The answer was no, right? And I think people get confused about this 11th tradition quite a bit, right? People, we get this idea, and I think this has been poisoned a little bit. I'm going to try not to soapbox. I'm going to stay loving and tolerant. But I think sometimes in our meetings, we get poisoned a little bit by misunderstandings and sayings. And, well, I heard this guy say that, and that sounded really good. Or, oh, my God, this lady she went on for 5 minutes, and she talked about this thing, and everybody laughed. And so, man, I'm going to say that same thing, and maybe I'm going to get some laughs, right? And I think Tradition 11 is one of these misunderstood ideas. And short form, guys, about anonymity. This is all the idea of anonymity. First of all, the first 4 words in the short form is our public relations policy. Our public relations policy. So this whole idea of anonymity is around what is our public relations policy. And by the way, beyond the long form of the traditions and beyond how the traditions are talked about in the 12 and 12, and beyond, if you read A.A. Comes of Age, who's got a lot of content about how the traditions work. There's other stuff too, right? If I remember, sometimes I tend to go sideways and I forget the point I was going to make, so I'm just going to put this out here. I want to come back to public service announcements if I remember, right? But that short form is our public relations policy is based on attraction rather than promotion. We need always maintain personal anonymity at the level of press, radio, and film. Okay, so at the beginning of this is being recorded. This is going to be uploaded to podcasts. It might make it on a YouTube. I'm not sure where this one goes, but it's freely shared in media. Now, is it press, radio, or film? No. right? So someone could say, well, I don't need to be personally anonymous at the level of podcasting. It's okay, literally, maybe true. In the spirit of the tradition, I would say untrue. The idea is if I'm going to be broadcasted out there, I don't get to put things that can be traced back to me personally at the level of big media, right? Why? Because I am not the face of AA. Who am I? I'm just David G. in Sandwich, Illinois, doing what? Taking new guys through the work. That's it. I'm just David G. in Sandwich being a part of a group, getting together with my guys, staying in touch, going to meetings together, getting together for coffee and the meal, right? I'm just David G. in Sandwich, making sure I got a service commitment so that I'm not just a coach, I'm a player. So that when I bust the chops of one of my sponsees and say, hey, what's your home group these days? Hey, what's your service commitment? They can bounce that right back to me. That's all I am, right? I am not the emperor of AA. I'm not Captain AA. My wife reminds me of that sometimes when I start to get the big ahead, because I should say, I mentioned I'm 21 years sober in AA. My wife, who's in the other room, 19 years sober in AA. Yes, we met in the meeting, and yes, thank God we met once we were both sober and recovered, right? But I can start to spiral, and I know what's going on, and I know what's best for everybody in AA, and she'll be like, all right, Captain AA, take it down a notch, right? And it's kind of a blessing to have that in my house. I'm not going to lie, right? Becky keeps me in check, and I'm okay with that, right? This is my place. I am shoulder to shoulder with you guys. We do this together, and we do it at a small personal level, right? And publicly, we stand honest. But guys, short form of Tradition 11 really only gives us a little bit of the story. What about the long form? I'm going to read this one too. It's so important. So our relations with the general public, again, our public relations policy, should be characterized by personal anonymity. We think that AA ought to avoid sensational advertising. Okay, so this comes to this idea of the public service announcements. Okay, I remember to come back to it. I don't know if any of you guys are in these online forums like Facebook AA groups and stuff like this. I'm in a few of them. I had to mute most of them because I've discovered that they test my boundaries of love and tolerance. Okay, and I know that's on me, and it's on me to take that to God. I'm just being real and accountable to you guys. So every once in a while, there'll be a thread in one of these online forums like, oh my God, I heard a public service announcement. I saw a commercial on TV. We're violating the 11th tradition. And it's quickly inflamed. Oh my God, violate the 11th tradition, all this stuff. And I was like, I saw this happening, and I was like, I bet we have a piece of literature about this. And I went into aa.org and I did a little search on public service announcements. And guess what immediately came up? A multi-page comprehensive document about Alcoholics Anonymous and how we support and endorse and create and produce public service announcements. We've got literature around this. Guess what, guys? It's not a violation of the 11th tradition. We're not doing it to go out fishing to get somebody on the line and to reel them in. We're doing it to let people know collectively, as an organization, as a fellowship, if you've got a problem with alcohol and you want to do something about it, which I'm paraphrasing the longer form of the third tradition, then we are here. That's it. Guess whose face is not on it? Mine. Guess whose face is not on it? Esteban, Debbie, Sarah, none of us. Guess whose faces are in the commercials? Paid actors, not members of AAs, right? We can go out there. We can do this nationally. We can do this internationally. We can do it locally. There's a little local radio station that does PSAs. But guess what? When we do these, we avoid sensational advertising. So what does that mean? I've seen some of these PSAs. It shows people sort of drinking. It gets a little dark. They do these things with colors. You know what it doesn't do? It doesn't show that person in a car ramming into a bridge embankment and then saying, got a drinking problem, call AA. No, right? We leave that part out of it. What it does is it suggests and implies, and it shows a little visual with somebody where we're to be led to this conclusion that this person is considering they have a drinking problem. And guess what, guys? When that person in this country or continent or across the pond, wherever you guys are this morning, this afternoon, we cannot make it difficult for us to find. And by the way, it's never been easier to find an AA meeting or group. Thank God, right? Because of the internet. For all the things we despise about the internet brings us a lot of blessings too, right? And those people who can't get out or are too afraid to come out at first, they can hop in a Zoom meeting like this, right? It's amazing to each and every one of us. The 11th tradition, long form, goes on to say, our names and pictures as AA members ought not to be broadcast, filmed, or publicly printed. Again, our public relations should be guided by the principle of attraction rather than promotion. There's never a need to praise ourselves. We feel it better to let our friends recommend us. So we don't go out and say, hey, AA saved 1 million lives this year. So let's send out a press release about how great we are. That is backwards. And I've never seen that, thank God. And sadly, I think what we talk about most of the time is we're struggling to help enough people. You know, that's something that me and my group of guys bemoan a lot, right? We're constantly in this. And I am so wonderfully imperfect, right? I'm still a very fallible human being doing his best to be in the agency and service of God. And I fall short sometimes, right? And I find myself sitting in judgment over discussion meetings where we're really not talking about the real problem of alcoholism and the real solution is outlined in our big book, right? And that's my problem when I'm sitting in judgment, right? And it's the biggest topic that I talk to my sponsor about. And sometimes I'll go a long time without talking to my sponsor. He'll be like, yeah, let's get together and we'll be shooting the breeze for a little while. And then he'll say, what are you doing when you're sitting in meetings and you're hearing people talk crazy? He knows. He knows. We don't have a lot of ongoing themes, but he knows about that one, right? So when my guys and I and my group of guys that we run together, and we're like, like we were going to this Sunday meeting after our study group at 9 a.m. and then we're all collectively like, we don't want to go to this meeting anymore. We don't like this meeting. People don't like us there because we're coming out of the book and they're too off topic, right? And then it occurred to me, I said, well, maybe because we don't like this meeting, guys, we should keep going to this meeting. Because guess who's going to this meeting? New guys that their entire experience is just discussion meetings. And our discussion meetings getting these guys to God? No, they're not. We got to go up to these guys and say, hey, man, you want to get into the steps? Do you want to get into this work so that you can get into the real work? Right? And this is the standard, we have to hold ourselves to, right? Very into big book recovery, me and my buddy David and all of our guys here today. This is just about, who does not need my original slant on anything? It doesn't need any of yours to have an original slant either. What it needs is for us to keep doing this thing the way that it's been doing for going on 90 years now, right? We've got an instruction manual, right here. Right? This tells us everything we need to know. Right. And so how do I do this? How do I help these guys? Well, the first thing I got to do is I got to show up where the new guys are who need help. It's so easy these days to just go to a meeting, right? But then what do I have to do? I have to make the approach. If I just wait for that guy to come through and say, okay, who here is available to sponsor, and I raise my hand, what are the chances that a guy's going to come up to me and be like, hey, man, first time I've ever been to an AA meeting, like what you said, can you help me? That, my experience, never happens. Same thing, I go up to the new guy and I give him my phone number and say, hey, man, give me a call, I'll help you. You know how frequently that guy calls? I can't say 1 in 100, maybe 1 in 50, right? But if I go to the new guy and I'm like, hey, I remember what it was like to be at my first meeting. I know this is weird and everybody here is weird and it's really scary. Give me your number. I'm going to call you and I'm going to help you understand what this is all about and I'll help you get better, right? This is what we do. And guess what? When I approach that newcomer, as it says repeatedly to do in our instruction manual here, I can't be anonymous. I didn't be like, hey, here's my name, I'm David, and here's my last name, and here's my phone number, right? And I live over here in Sandwich, and where do you live? Like, we have to get to know each other. We are not anonymous inside the fellowship, guys. This is where I think we so frequently get the 11th tradition wrong as we're in groups and meetings and interacting with each other. Guys, you got to know me, right? You got to know me and I got to know you. How are we supposed to form a relationship? We don't have a public relations policy between us. And how about this? Dr. Bob, right? One of the co-founders of Alcoholics Anonymous, he was very clear on what anonymity was supposed to mean as it relates to Alcoholics Anonymous. I got to read you this. I actually don't know where he originally talked about it, if he gave it in a talk or a letter, but from a Grapevine article. Here's what Dr. Bob said about traditional lemon. Since our tradition on anonymity designates the exact level where the line should be held, right? That's at public relations level. It must be obvious. So Dr. Bob's a little patronizing here, which I kind of love because he's known to be this sweetheart. He's being heavy-handed. Must be obvious to everyone who can read and understand the English language that to maintain anonymity at any other level is definitely a violation of this tradition. Guys, Dr. Bob said, if you don't know me and I don't know you, we are violating tradition 11. Now, this also doesn't say we get together and I spill my guts and I tell you all the problems I'm having with my wife and my job and everything. Like, we don't turn this into a personal co-therapy session. That's not what's talking about here. But this is saying we can share last names. We can share addresses. You can come to my home. I'll tell you a huge blessing that sort of speaks to this as well. 4 weeks from yesterday, so the first Saturday in December, my wife and I here in our home are going to have I think it's our 10th annual sober holiday party, where we have everybody from our local community comes into our home to get together to celebrate the holidays, right? And some years we've had like 80 people, just packed house. Last few years, fortunately, it's been a little smaller, more like 40, 50 people, which is nice because when there's 80 people running around in the house, my wife and I don't stop for 6 hours. All we're doing is like refilling coffee and cooking appetizers and stuff like this. When it's 40, 45 people, we can actually interact and have fun in our party. So I'm sort of hoping for a smaller crowd again. But it's like, guys, everybody's welcome to my home. I cannot be less anonymous than that, right? Like, come over, be a part of our lives, meet my 5 dogs, right? This is like how we need to interact and be together and not be afraid, right? We can't sit in fear to start to be known to each other. Here's the other thing that Dr. Bob went on to say. The AA who hides his identity from his fellow AA by using only a given name, so just David, violates the tradition just as much as the AA who permits his name to appear in the press in connection with matters pertaining to AA. So what that means is if I say I get interviewed for an article and I'm David and my last name and it gets printed in the Chicago Tribune, violation of tradition, Dr. Bob's saying, right? But what he's also saying is, I say, I'm David and I'm talking to Jose in a meeting, and he's like, well, what's your last name? I'll put it in my phone. I got a bunch of Davids. Well, I can't tell you my last name. Dr. Bob said, I am violating the tradition equally. We are not anonymous inside the fellowship. And by the way, guess what else we can do inside the fellowship? We can promote. Publicly, we attract. We don't promote. Inside, absolutely I need to promote. We're putting on a 12-step workshop. We say, newcomers, come, we're going to get you through 12 steps in 4 hours. Or David and I we've done this a few times on Zoom, 12 steps in 12 weeks. I'm promoting it because I want people to show up. Guess where I'm promoting it? Inside the fellowship, right? I'm not going to hospitals or to online non-AA resources and putting a flyer up there. No, right? I'm letting Mary know. I'm letting Sandy know. I'm letting Angela know, right? Come study with us. Come learn how to take somebody else through the steps. So Dr. Bob finished this little bit up by saying the former, right, which is hiding the identity from his fellow, the former is maintaining his anonymity above the level of press, radio, and films, and the latter is maintaining his anonymity below the level of press, radio, and films. Whereas the tradition states we should maintain our anonymity at the level of press, radio, and films, right? Guys, carry this with you. Be known in recovery, right? Be known to your peers. And most of all, be known to the newcomers. We all have so much to share, right? Remember, whether you've been around, 21 years like me, 21 days like there's probably somebody in here, or I'll say this. If you're here for day number 2 and somebody's here for day number 1, who do you think the newcomer is going to relate to better? Me? 21 years? Or you on day 2 or 20? Guys, when I came in and I met other people and they said they were sober 20 years, sometimes I know people are speaking to say, oh, I didn't believe it. It's not that I didn't believe people when they said they'd been sober 20 plus years. It's that I couldn't comprehend that. Like, it just didn't make sense in my head, right? It was like, I came in broken and busted in having no concept of what it would be like not to drink. And what I always say is like, because at first, like, I wasn't even fully convinced. I avoided getting in a lot of legal trouble. Right? That was my circumstances. If you look at the third step in the 12 and 12, it talks about circumstance over virtue is what drives us into AA. Circumstances. I was in handcuffs and I should have gotten a lot of trouble, and I got to walk away from it, and I got real scared and I started going to meetings. Right? But I still wasn't fully convinced that I was going to stop drinking, because I'm like, well, what do you drink when you eat pizza and chicken wings? Like Diet Coke? Like, no, you drink beer, right? I'm like, what about when I'm trying to be fancy and I go out at night? Oh, I have to swirl my glass of red wine because, I was real sophisticated when I was drinking, right? I came around to the fact, right, that I couldn't drink. And so when those new people are coming in and I know their heads are going the same way, I got to be able to relate to them. There was a guy, Dave S., who I met in either my first meeting or my first week of meetings, and he had been sober 20, 25 years at the time. And I was like, I couldn't relate to that dude. But my buddy Vince, who I met in that first week, I remember him coming up to me and he's like, yeah, I've been sober. I've been doing this about 6 months. And he was real grave with how he said it. He's like, it's hard, but you know what? It's working, man. He's like, this, here's my number. Let's hang out. And I was like, 6 months. That made sense. That was relatable. I couldn't think about what that was really going to look like, but I was like, 6 months, right? 2 decades, 3 decades. I couldn't get into that, right? And I couldn't understand at first some of the stories these people were telling, but I'll tell you the beautiful thing that happened by going to a lot of meetings early in recovery, is that I came in feeling like I suffered uniquely, right? That nobody understood how bad things were for me. That nobody ever had those crazy arguments in your head. Any of you guys ever have those crazy arguments in your head with yourself? Yeah, I see everybody nodding. Anybody have them so bad like me that sometimes you had to shout out loud, shut up, because I couldn't control the voices in my head. And I'm not talking voices like I'm schizophrenic, and respect anybody here. My mother, rest in peace, suffered from schizophrenia for many years. She had a different kind of voices in her head. But those of us who suffered from untreated alcoholism, we get those voices in our own head. The problem is it's only my voice, but it's got a lot of different tones and timbers. And those voices in my head never agreed, and they never loved each other. And they never said, David, you were great. You can do this. They never said, David, you could stop drinking. David, you could have a better life. They didn't say any of that. They said, David, you're garbage. But by the way, you're the most important piece of garbage in the world. So keep walking around with your chest puffed out. Right. And just know you can outthink and outdrink and outrun and outmuscle any problem you run into. And that's how I carried myself for 30 years of my life until I finally surrendered, because I couldn't outthink or outdrink or outrun or outmuscle my ism, right? My ism was absolutely crushing me, guys, right? I came to terms with step one, right? How did I come to terms with step one? Well, I was given this book, not this particular copy. I think this guy, John F., gave me one of the little mini, and I don't even know if I have it. I think I passed it on to another newcomer, but he gave me one of the little mini blue books early on, and everyone's like, read this book. And I will say this with all humility. I'm a pretty bright guy. I'm very well read. I come from a family of highly educated people. I just have a college degree, but like my stepmom is a retired physician. My dad has a PhD in education. My brother was a lawyer. My sister, I think, has 2 master's degrees. Like, reading was a big part. Like, basically, we came out of the womb and we're handed a book. Well read. I went to one of the best public universities in the nation, University of Illinois, Go Fighting Illini. And I took honors Shakespeare classes there, right? And deconstructing. And my point here is not to try to convince you guys how smart I am, right? It's not it. Point is, I couldn't read this book. It may as well have been written upside down and backwards and in like ancient Greek or Aramaic or Sanskrit or something. I could not read this book. And the reason why I couldn't read this book is because I had a mental block that said, this ain't you. Yeah, you got a problem, but guess what, David? You outthink, you outdrink, you outmuscle, you outrun. Right? I couldn't read this book, so I needed someone to read it with me. I needed someone to explain it to me. I needed someone from day one to explain to me step one, right? That I'm powerless over alcohol. What does it mean to be powerless over alcohol? It means that I can't stop thinking about drinking, that I've got a mental obsession that no matter how bad things get every time I drink, I pick up a drink again. I cannot differentiate the true from the false. That's my mental powerlessness. And then a worse thing happens once I pick up, right? What does it say? Past the lips, through the gums, look out belly, here it comes, or however that goes. That first one down my throat, I break out in craving. We used to call it the phenomenon of craving. Now it's understood, right? Biologically. I got a problem. I don't stop until I run out, pass out, get thrown out, one of those outs, right? I break out in the craving. The craving is activated as soon as I start drinking. I am physically powerless over alcohol, and bad stuff happens. I don't have 2 drinks. I have 22 drinks, right? And then, and like I say, I have a train wrecky evening, and the next day my mental obsession, my mental powerlessness kicks back in, right? And I got to start it all over again. And this is the message I have to carry to a new guy when he's in for his first meeting. He doesn't need to hear the whole 40 minutes or an hour of my war story. He just needs to hear, hey, man, I hit it hard. Let's give a story or two. Let's establish rapport, right? For sure. I think it's great. But then be like, hey, man, do you identify this? Because it's really those 2 questions that are on the top of page 44. I paraphrased it down. But the new guy, it's like, I want to make sure he's in the right place. First of all, I want to make sure he's got a problem with alcohol. Because if his problem's not with alcohol, but someone said, oh, just go to AA for that cocaine problem or that marijuana problem. No, we got other fellowships out there. There's over 200 of them, and I'll get someone to the right fellowship for sure. I'm a member of some other fellowships, right? But if you have this physical powerlessness over alcohol like I do, and you have this mental powerlessness over alcohol like I do, then you're probably in the right place. And here's what it looked like in my life. Again, a little rapport, telling a couple of crazy stories, just like Bill and Bob did when they went to see guys in the hospital, as illustrated in our textbook. But then how about after the dash? How about after the dash in the first step, right? That my life, I'm just going to speak in the first person here, that my life was unmanageable. What does it mean to have an unmanageable life, right? Was it that I was always running out of money and that I was always burning friendships? I mean, yeah, sort of those external things for sure. But how about what was going on inside of me? What was going on in my head? How was I thinking? What was going on in my heart? How was I feeling? And what was going on in my belly? What were my beliefs? How was I reacting? Right? My thinking, my feeling, my reacting, my head, my heart, and my gut, they were so sick and twisted, guys. Right? And I go to those bedevilments on page 52. Guys, if you're new, or maybe you're not new, but you've never gotten into the program of recovery in our book, which, by the way, Alcoholics Anonymous is this. It's our program. It's our system. It's our design for living. Yeah, it's also how we get together in the fellowship like this. But the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous serves only to support each of us collectively, but individually in unity, working the program recovery, right? This is the purpose here. And so if you've never gotten into the book, please get into the book. Hopefully somebody approaches you and says, let me help you. But if not, feel free to approach somebody and look at page 52, second paragraph. We refer to these things as the bedevilments. And I got to go there. I just got it. It's hard for me not to give a talk without getting into the first step a little bit. This is, again, I mentioned how David and I go to treatment centers every month, and we do the same first step prep every time. We go to doctor's opinion, Roman numeral 28, top paragraph. It talks about the physical craving. Bottom paragraph talks about the mental obsession. It just gives a little hint of the unmanageability. So Roman numeral 28 and 29, doctor's opinion. Then we jump to 52 because we got to talk about what happens after the dash. And then we go to page 27, which gives a little sneak preview of what it's going to look like in step 12 when I get recovered. And then we leave. We bring the house down on page 25 at the bottom where we're talking about being at the turning point, basically, right? Making a decision, you want to proceed or not. But I got to go to page 52. These bedevilments, it's amazing how we're in a treatment center. The head nods we get. People nodding heads more at this. than when we describe the powerlessness. They're into the powerlessness in the men, right? All these tough guys, especially when they're all men's unit, they all get the arms crossed, like, oh, baby, tough, right? This doesn't apply to me. David and I actually like going to the co-ed unit better because it's funny. The men kind of let their guard down a little bit or around the women. I don't know. It's kind of a cool dynamic that way. So looking at these bedevilments, it's amazing. We were having trouble with personal relationships. Who the heck wasn't having trouble with personal relationships when they came into recovery? What are personal relationships? The one with my wife, my girlfriend, my kids, my parents, my neighbors, my coworkers, right? Everybody's always like, check, 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 check. Trouble with all those personal relationships, right? We couldn't control our emotional natures. I was so angry all the time for no good reason, right? Flare-ups, driving in traffic, somebody cuts me off. I'm like, F you, and I'm flipping them off, and maybe I'm tailgating them for the next 5 miles, right? We are prey to misery and depression. I know everybody's journey and path to getting here, there's sort of different twists and turns. We all end up in the same place. But I'm guessing many of you are like me, which is like towards the end, I would wake up in the morning and open my eyes, and I would say, not again. Not again what? Not again anything. Not again everything. I was so miserable. I felt overwhelmed with misery. I was so prey to misery and depression. And to me, the little analogy I came up with, it's like I had 5 giant pots of boiling misery, but I only had a 4-burner stove. So no matter how I tried to rearrange all the misery, I didn't have enough room to manage it all. We couldn't make a living. It doesn't mean also. Certainly, I'd been unemployed for 3-4 months when I came into recovery, the longest stretch of my life for sure. But this isn't about being able to punch a time clock. It's like, am I enjoying my job? Do I show up in time? Do I work all day? Am I stealing? Am I talking crap about my boss? Right? How about, can I be happy in my career? I don't know many people that come in that are making a living because they're not happy in their career. Do I have a feeling of uselessness? Who is depending on me for anything, guys? Nobody. And by the way, I didn't want to participate, so how much use could I be? Am I full of fear? Guys, full of fear. Not occasionally timid. Not sometimes scared. I'm talking full of fear that I only see the world in fear-based outcomes. Right? Am I unhappy? If I'm already 6 of 6 on these bedevilments, how happy am I going to be? I already know the answer to that. I'm not happy. And the last one, could I seem to be of real help to other people? Real help, guys. You know what real help to other people is? That means I am giving with no expectation of what I get out of it, right? Not only are these great questions to ask somebody brand new when they're coming into recovery, but these are kind of a good spot check for me to do as a recovered alcoholic on an ongoing basis. Right? I'm noticing, man, I've been having to do a lot of 10-step spot checks and sharing them with a sponsor or one of my running buddies. I see those things flaring up a lot. I should go through the checklist of those bedevilments and ask myself how I'm doing. They're probably going to illuminate something that's missing in my recovery game today. So here's the last thing I want to talk about as I'm wrapping up here. So I've got a couple of minutes left. So I thought about this. This came to my understanding a few years ago that there's about 2 million members worldwide in AA. And this number of 2 million has been up or down about 10%, but hasn't deviated much from the mean in the last couple of decades. And I'm like, why aren't there more people in AA? Why do we only have 2 million people in AA? There's 8 billion people on this planet. They say 10% of us are alcoholics. We should have 800 million people in AA. So I thought, how on earth are we going to carry this message to get 800 million people in here, right? That was the question I had. So it occurred to me that if I just got 3 guys correctly through the work and helped them build a new relationship with God over the course of my entire recovery, only 3. That's all I'm talking about. Now, I've sponsored hundreds of guys in 21 years, but if I only did 3, and each of those guys only got 3 guys through the work, and each of those guys only got 3 guys through the work, then it becomes a math equation. So you guys remember exponents from grade school? So I came up with 3 to the 15th power, which is 3 times 3 times 3, 15 times. Each of us only gets 3 people through the steps. So starting from me, If I get 3 guys through the steps and it goes 15 times down the line, it's 14,348,907 people. Starting just from me, guys, we would have 7 times the number of people that we enjoy in AA today. So where are we falling down? Go ask the brothers, Chris and Myers are. They'll tell you. Biz for sponsorship. That's on me. That's on Vicky. That's on David. That's on Carol. That's on all of us. But guys, that's 14 million coming just from me. I got 78 of us in here, I noticed at one point. Take 78 times the 14,348,907 people. This meeting alone today here can get sober 1,119,214,746 people. We have the reach here, guys, to get 1.1 billion people sober, and all we have to do is by taking them through the work. Thanks for having me to here today, guys, and letting me share.